Hi, everyone. To sort of set the scene for the discussion online and for next class, I wanted to give a very brief little mini lecture, a gloss on the readings we have before us. Some of you might be wondering, why are we reading ancient Greek philosophy in a course on religion and literature? Why Plato and Aristotle? Why are these guys here? And just to remember, one part of this seminar is meta-historical. It's about tracing the genealogy of disciplines, of trying to get a sense of how the practice of something like hermeneutics, the science and theory of the interpretation of text, was birthed out of the terrain of Judeo-Christian theology. And I'm speaking here about the university system as it came to be developed in Western Europe, and how this hermeneutics was applied to non-sacred texts like poetry and novels. The invention of something like literature departments at the end of the 19th century follows the contours of a longer story about modernity and the ways that textual practices of interpretation policed the boundary between the sacred and the profane. So this is a kind of archaeology of knowledge, to paraphrase the work of Michel Foucault, and I'm very interested in those fissures and fault lines that portray deeper epistemes, that's a term also from Foucault, formations of knowledge, epistemes, as they shift and alter between different historical periods. A key site of such shifts is the late medieval period in the university system in Europe, where the recovery of ancient Greek philosophical texts by Plato, Aristotle, especially the poet Lucretius, helped provoke a shift in understanding of the human condition. This helped generate what we call the Renaissance, right? And something more difficult to categorize, which is the so-called humanism of the Renaissance, which is something different, we should say, from our current valences we put around to humanism in the 21st century. This renewed attention to classical languages and philosophy gave birth to epistemes we still live with in the university. And remember, for all of you as students at the GTU, you were part of a medieval institution, a continuity of a practice, a habitus of thinking that goes back centuries. And the so-called studia humanitatis, the study of the human subject at the university, which begins in the Renaissance period. This studia humanitatis includes 5 areas in its traditional format: grammar, rhetoric, history, poetry, and philosophy. Grammar, rhetoric, history, poetry, and philosophy. This comes out of the encounter of Christian Europe with these ancient so-called pagan texts by Aristotle, Plato, and others. You'll notice in that group, I did not say theology, which remained the province of organized religion. And in a way, our seminar on religion and literature, the split between these two terms, begins here in the studia humanitatis. God talk remained in one realm, and there was another area of poetry, history, rhetoric. These are something like the foundations of the secular and its later modern spaces of the public sphere, which is anticipating much later in the 18th century with the invention of the newspaper and the novel, things we'll turn to later in the class. So for next week and our discussion online now, in our readings from Plato and Aristotle, please pay attention and read for what these authors have to say about religion. And we shouldn't even really use the word religion here, for that is a much later modern and arguably even specifically Protestant sort of concept. Where does Plato, where does Aristotle lay out conceptual grammars and typologies of form for different kinds of language, spoken, written, and how do these relate to the gods, to the space of beyond the human, the supernatural? I will leave it up to Jesus, who is our discussion leader, to kick off the dialogue, but I just wanted to begin by giving a bit of a framing and an overview about why we're looking at these ancient texts. And I really look forward to reading what you have to say on the Slack channels and talking about them next week in class. Stay well and read and talk to you soon.